Should move Mike out of the way.
Well, I look like the outcast, like I was wanted down there by the, kind of like him.
Tony, everybody.
All righty. Welcome to the EMS committee meeting. And since it was proven in the disaster committee meeting this morning that I now control the time-space continuum, I'm going to see if we can't get out of here before our meeting time is allotted. And so I'll take roll. I'm going to pass this piece of paper around to the committee while it's there because DSHS is asking to collect our most up-to-date phone number and email address, and then whether or not you'd like that published on the web. Some folks, I think they have to ask that now, but anyway. And that's on the GETAC list, I believe, correct? As we're asking if that's going to be published is in the committee listing. And so just circle yes or no when you see that come by you. And our first item on our agenda is an update from EMS for Children. And you know, a lot of times we as EMS providers always get accused that we may not care about the pediatric patient, or we don't do enough for the pediatric patient, and that somehow we're scared or maybe offended by the pediatric patient. And I really don't know what it says, that Tony is over here by himself and the rest of the committee is over here.
I can see y'all from here.
Anyway, Tony, give us your report, please.
All right, thanks. All right, so several things to talk about, but we'll go really quick. Just recently, the revisions came out, or a draft revision came out for the equipment on ambulances document, something that we have talked about in the past, and because we did make this as one of the rule recommendations as a resource guide, we felt that certainly it's important that that be as valid as possible. So what we did was took all of the feedback that we got from these committees and from other stakeholders in the last year, and we put that together with some data and some research that was available, and some comments from some of our emergency physicians and surgeons and such as that, and sent those recommendations in. And all of the recommendations that we made based on your comment were included in the draft. And that's still being looked at, but I'm not sure when that's going to come out, but we're hoping by the end of the year. All right. So pediatric protocol resource, something we've been working on for quite some time. We have now, if you recall, we had asked for input on 4 topics that we could send to the Evidence-Based Outcome Center to do evidence-based summaries on these. That is a very time-consuming and expensive process to do that correctly. They have now finished all 4 of those. Just got the latest ones today, matter of fact, in its finalized version. And we will be presenting all of that tomorrow at the Pediatrics Committee. What the recommendations are, what the evidence is, such as that. It's going to be a brief presentation, but it will kind of show you what we learned from that. And we are going to be working toward continuing this process in some way or another. So we'll be talking about more topics in the future. And those recommendations and those evidence-based summaries will be posted on the website. We're still working out the details with our IT people about exactly how we're going to do that, because what we want to do is put that on a resource portal, and then you know, not only track who uses it, but also we really think that's something that we want to vet through possibly this committee, certainly the medical directors, before we put that out there as a resource. And so we'll be working on how we're going to do that between now and next quarter. We did also, we are going to be making a presentation tomorrow on the EMS provider survey that we did at the conference, and the medical director survey that we sent out. I'm not going to go into detail because we'll do that in the presentation tomorrow, but just some of the real brief highlights are that there was a lot of agreement between the EMS providers and the medical directors on several things. First, what some of the problems were. Secondly, the medical directors and the providers and the agencies that we surveyed in 2010 all agree that evidence-based pediatric protocols would be useful. They all agree that a regional resource for online medical direction would be useful. One of the more important things that I think we found out, no surprise, is that when there are problems with agencies contacting medical control, cell phone and radio problems are a big concern, but both the medical directors and the providers listed secondly, and with a large margin, the fact that nobody, when people call medical control, there may be nobody to answer the phone or no medical director or physician available to pick up that call. So the one problem is technical and much more difficult to handle. The other problem is something we can certainly work on. And so we'll be working on those things in the future. But like I said, we'll do those presentations tomorrow. And I invite everybody to come see those presentations tomorrow at the Pediatrics Committee. What time do we meet tomorrow, the Pediatrics? I think it's 2:30. I don't remember. 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. Okay, thanks. And that's it.
Any questions for Tony? Yeah, 10:30. All right, the next item on our agenda is just the update on Chapter 157 and that timeline, and that's still moving forward, I'm guessing. With some target of hopefully in the fall, pending bad weather and other disasters. And if there's anything else on that, I know we're slated to look at some things that will probably be additional recommendations that on that anti-fraud stuff that we were going to meet on. But if there's anything else like that, we can get that to the committee, we can send it up the line as well. So next on our agenda is a report from the work group examining the air medical versus ground issues. And Justin, I know you and Eddie are from our committee on that.
Yes.
And are y'all giving a report, or
Roberta is.
Roberta's giving a report?
She's who's chairing that committee.
Oh, that's true.
We've met a couple times now. I know I'm on tiptoes. We've met a couple times now. This morning was our most recent. We've decided that we need to identify and nail down some answers from dishes on some of the questions, and so we'll be working on drafting, and I think we've got 3 or 4 questions, specifically facility to facility, if we have an ALS crew in the back of a BLS truck, the ALS being the air medical, if they're not licensed in Texas, and then we see a run report that shows that we had to monitor controlled substances in that. We need just some definition on what documentation, how to, and a process, and then also scene calls. And so we'll be drafting these questions, sending them forward to dishes, and we'll bring them back to this committee, and Dudley, I'll give them to you. Okay? That's it.
Anything from Roberta on that? Or Eddie or Justin? All right, thank you, man. Next on our agenda is the item regarding increasing number of ground EMS providers in metropolitan areas, yada, yada, yada. It's been on there for a couple, 3 meetings now, and we had slated on Tuesday to meet on this, and that meeting got canceled late last week. And I first need to apologize to those who showed up for that meeting. My humblest apologies on that. That got canceled at a very late date. We weren't going to be able to have a quorum, or if we were, for only a short amount of time. There were a lot of people that had additional items come up. So we were working on scheduling a different date to meet. I believe we are zeroed in around October 12th. And then there is some discussion about where we want to have that meeting. And so I'll open that up to the committee to figure that out. If there's anybody that can't make October 12th, it's a great time to speak up now. And then where? Justin would like to see us come to the Panhandle. Eddie likes Ozona. It's not a bad place. I've driven through it a couple of times. And so it may work.
Okay, but I was wondering, is there enough input, enough interest around the state that we can provide that type of environment, south, east, west, north, do 3 meetings and cover
67, when we tore into that entire rule, when Jane opened that up for it. We met in Houston and Dallas and here in Austin, and I think we met in Lubbock. And San Antonio, I think we met in San Antonio, so. Not really, but this is a little bit different topic than the entire rules, and there's a lot of people interested in this for a variety of reasons. Some of the ideas are a little bit out there, and some of them are going to affect everybody. Well, you know, I mean, they're all going to end up affecting everybody, but I'm not opposed to that. I mean, you know, it's just time. What we may do is try the October 12th one somewhere centrally, and if we get a great response to that, then maybe we can set between then and November before our meeting at the conference, maybe one more, and move that to a different location in the state, give other people a chance to participate. What's your thoughts on that?
It works. Sure.
Since it affects the metro areas primarily, that seems to be the hotbed of discussion as far as where the topic's going to predominate. Why don't we try to focus in one of those key spots? Because typically, we all see it from one vantage point. And there are other players out there that we may think of as being the bad guys, but we do need to have them at the table for those discussions. If there's a side of this we're not hearing, we need to hear that.
Absolutely. Justin did say Dallas would be a good area. He can get there very easily and cheaply. Tammy has,
I guess a place.
can get us a place to meet close to the airport. She's done that before, so she got us a place at the school last time. They have a restaurant there where they sell food by the pound.
Wow. Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah. I got a picture of that on my phone. Not that place. Anyway, is that what we do October 12th in Dallas?
Sure. Sounds good. Sure.
Okay. Tammy, if you could get us a location, so I can get that to DSHS so we can get the open meeting stuff out of the way early. And that'll be our next one. And it'll be like Tuesday was supposed to be. We'll do it on that single agenda item. And start looking through those ideas that have been presented to DSHS. So, anything else on that?
Will DSHS be there?
I don't know if they will or they won't. Actually, you know if anybody would be there at that meeting as we start going through those fraud suggestions that the TAA submitted? Or y'all gonna, or is y'all's plan to let us hammer those out as a committee and then bring them to you? I mean,
Hammer them out. If you need somebody there, just let me know. We can get somebody if you need somebody there.
when those were submitted, Ms. Perkins, Commissioner Perkins and her staff met with the TAA, and they pretty much went through each one and said, this we can't do by rule, it would have to be legislative, because we don't have a charge to do that legally, but these could all be done by rule. So we kind of already have that breakdown. So on those suggested changes. Does anybody have anything that y'all want to bring forward today about the increasing number of transport providers in metropolitan areas? And it's basically the fraud issue going on. And I hate to say the larger cities, it's where it's predominantly located and getting the most attention, but I know it's other places around the state as well. Anything for the good of the order today? Other than to beat me up and cancel the meeting really late?
There have been some actions taken. The providers in the greater Houston area, at least, have seen some actions taken by other agencies. I know a lot of EMS have got visits from the Department of Labor and things like that. So there's other people working on it rather than just this, and that's really great. Whoever thought of bringing in those collateral organizations, get going.
And there's been some media out there. I know HHSC and the OIG here in Texas, as well as CMS, has visited some folks unannounced wearing dark jackets with bright yellow lettering on the back and carrying large firearms. And I know that's going on, and that's happening a little bit more frequently. And I had the opportunity to meet with some folks from the OIG and HHSC and the Attorney General's office, and asking them to speak at the TA conference in April if they would desire to about some of the things they're seeing and that type of thing. And they insinuated that by next April they should have a lot of things to come share with us. So I don't think they're done. I think they're extremely moving forward with that extremely hard. I know CMS is. It'll be interesting when Novitas takes over in November, what they do in response to the issues that are going on in those larger cities. So I think Trailblazers was moving forward, and then they lost the contract, so they may have stopped with their behavior. But the new provider has a track record of addressing this. They're the ones that put all hospital discharge ambulance transports on prepayment review in Florida. So it'll be interesting to see what they do after the first of the year.
You want to, real quick, can you explain what that is? I don't think.
Prepayment review just means you don't get paid until they review the claim in its entirety and make sure it was medically justified, regardless of whatever paperwork you bring in. They just review everything. It basically slows down payment. And that's hospital discharges. There's been some concern by the providers here in the state that they might look at doing that on all transports or all non-emergency transports or that kind of thing, just because of how out of control this appears to be. So it's not good. It's being recognized by everybody, and it's affecting all of us. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but it's affecting all of us in the way we get paid and how we get paid and what we get paid for. And it's harming patients as well, because there's legitimate patients that need to go by ambulance that are finding themselves unable to obtain that transport now, because the bad apples have created a situation that's caused the reimbursement folks to not pay for those patient groups. So we need to get busy addressing it. Anything else on that from anybody? Number 5 is the pharmaceutical shortage, recent issues, methods of addressing this, and sharing its best practices. Anybody have anything to share on that? Brian Petrilla's looking for epi.
1 to 10,000.
1 to 10,000. So if anybody's got any and willing to share.
Really?
You know, in our region, I'll share a couple of things. Last time I shared about the accredited compounding pharmacies, and EMS World did an article on the drug shortage, and they interviewed several people, and myself and Dr. Manifold from San Antonio were interviewed in that article, and talked about what we were doing as a region. And we talked how heavily we were relying upon our compounding pharmacy. Since then, our compounding pharmacy has had a visit from the DEA.
That'll teach you.
Totally out of the blue, I'm sure. And so they basically explained to our compounding pharmacy the need to get licensed as a drug manufacturer for doing controlled medications. And they suggested through an order that they cease and desist by tomorrow morning, not tomorrow morning, but the day they were there, the next day. So they stayed up all night, compounded a bunch of controlled meds, and put them on the shelf, and then they stopped. They did examine their business practices. They are getting licensed as a drug manufacturer for the controlled meds. It doesn't affect the non-controlled meds. But in conversations with some of the licensing authorities they have to go through with that, it was also suggested that maybe that one of the issues that folks have is a lot of times those compounding pharmacies, and I think this goes back to the accreditation piece, but those compounding pharmacies cannot always be certain about what it is you're getting in that syringe or that vial as far as its potency and dosage and things like that. So we're actually looking at now doing some, looking into getting some testing done on some of the meds that we've had them make for us. For no other reason, just as a QI check for our medical directors and the agencies in our region, to have a little bit of comfort level that what they tell us they're giving us is really what they're giving us. They're doing that some because they're trying to extend the expiration dates on a few of the meds that they're getting hit a lot on. But so if anybody ever comes to ask, you know, we as a region looked into this as well. So it's a weird thing. I saw an email the other day. The state of Florida has interpreted their rules on the books that their EMS agencies can't use compounding pharmacies because of the way compounding pharmacies are denied in statute in Florida, which I think is kind of interesting, and I'm glad that we haven't done that here in Texas yet. So anybody else have any best practices or things you'd like to share or issues you've seen arise out of this?
When you say region, are you saying your rack?
Right, yeah.
So as your rack is purchasing through the compounding or your individual?
We're getting pricing right now. We're not sure exactly who's going to pay for that yet. Depends on how expensive it is. So we may use some non-discretionary rack funds there if it's not horribly expensive, and if it's more than what the rack feels they can do, then there's some of us that will probably pool some money and get a few of them tested.
And when you said we're considering testing as a QI, you mean the rack?
Yes.
Or do you mean your agency? I'm just
Well,
wondering.
the rack is.
Gotcha.
We've approached this drug shortage as a region.
Gotcha.
So.
Makes sense.
Is there any language that we can, Maxie, I'm kind of looking at you and you guys over there. Is there any language that we can put at the beginning of our protocols, instead of having to reprint protocols for whatever many animals is and all that, that basically says, if we don't have this medication, then it may be substituted with something like or near this type of medication or concentration based on, I mean, would you accept language like that in the front of a set of protocols, just as a page slid in there and be done with it? Let me tell you what my protocols look like right now. You open them up and there are pages shoved in there and there's memo after memo after memo and stapled in there because, oh, we had to change this page and we had to change that page. And I think everybody else is seeing the same thing. I didn't mean to put you on the spot here. I just was hoping maybe you had some guidance.
I'm used to
for
it.
us.
Don't worry about it. That's what I get paid big dollars for.
That's right.
Hey, I heard something in the medical directors that I thought was interesting that I thought hadn't heard of and hadn't thought about. If you put on your equipment list possibly that you're going to use this drug or this drug, of course you have to put the quantity and stuff. You may be able to do that so that if you don't have one drug and you substitute for another one. I hadn't thought about that one before. I don't know anything else, Brian, to be honest, because, you know, statutorily, we've got to look at what you say you have there.
One of the things.
So I don't have an answer for you on that.
Kind of a diuretic, 10 milligrams. Some sort of a diuretic.
Well, one of the things.
I don't know. All the diuretics.
Yeah.
This one and this
You know what?
does, or
Just
this
staple
one
the
and this
PDR
does.
too.
This one and this does.
Just make sure you put the quantity on there.
That's right.
But I think that's what the medical directors were concerned about, was ending up with like 180 pages of possibilities that you had.
Right. You know, the department want to work with y'all. We understand the shortage and stuff, but of course, it's not anybody in this room or at the table that we're really concerned about. But as you all know, the situation that we have in various parts of the state and who those providers are. So we have to protect the public, and that's what our main goal is to do. I don't think we're going to do anything that's going to jeopardize anything you all are doing as long as you can justify what it is. So we'll work with y'all. The key is to keep the manager in your compliance area informed and his staff to give them an idea of what's going on down there, and they'll tell you the best way to address that. Kind of like the DEA, it can all be different. No.
I gotta make a phone call real quick.
Yeah. All right, anybody else? Anybody out in the audience have anything to share about the drug shortage? Horror stories, best practices? Things you don't want DSHS to know about? We can ask them to put their fingers in their ears. All righty. Next thing we have on our agenda is I received several phone calls, and I think a couple people on the committee did too. Governmental, or what HHSC described as governmental transport providers, received a letter from them regarding some different options for reimbursement through Medicaid. basically on a cost basis. And a lot of people are wondering if that's something that is worth pursuing. Basically what you do is you contact them, they send you some documents, you send them a letter stating you want to pursue at the end of the year or the end of the federal fiscal year. Then you submit to them in their format a cost report that what it cost you to run the Medicaid calls that you ran in the year. They then look at that cost report and they compare it to what it was that you were reimbursed at the Medicaid rate. And if there's a difference, then they address that. So if your costs are $15,000 and you were reimbursed $10,000, then they would give you $5,000 of the federal matching funds that the state gets to make that up. It's only open to governmental providers. It's not open to private agencies that contract with governmental providers. It has something to do with the way it was written into the law. The other piece of that, which I'm hard pressed knowing what Medicaid reimburses to see where this could happen, although potentially I guess it could in some really high Medicaid payer mixes where agencies have really ratcheted down their costs. So maybe they have a lot of volunteers and they don't have a lot of labor costs and that type of thing. But the flip side of that is if you did $15,000 worth of Medicaid transports, they paid you $15,000 and your cost report showed that you only spent $10,000 doing that, they're going to want their $5,000 back. Which they will either, you can write them a check for, or they'll just take it out of the next $5,000 you bill them for. I think there's some risk. I know there's some agencies that are pursuing that to see what it takes. And there may be some folks in the room that would like to speak to that as well. We're still evaluating it ourselves to see if it's something that we want to pursue, if it's worth the time, energy, and effort to pursue that. But with what Medicaid has done this year with the stopping of crossover payments for all transports, for the dual eligible providers, this may be a way for some governmental entities to get some of that back.
Has anybody been through the process yet that you know of?
I'm not aware if anybody's been through that. Has anybody here been through that process or started that other than, do you?
I've got it on my desk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it too.
Yeah.
But as
I'm
far
looking
as
for the guinea
starting
pig.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
Who's going to be the brave soul?
Has anybody out there done anything more than got the information from Ms. Barnhart or whatever her name is at HHSC? All righty. So see, we're all waiting. Eddie, it's up to you, brother.
Here, Mom, let me help you out here.
It is an intriguing offer. I know that, and I don't know if there's anybody here from Austin Travis County EMS. I know they were participating in a pilot program similar to this over the last year and a half, and so maybe we could have Ernie come talk to us a little bit about that and the success they've seen. I don't know if it's the exact same program, but I believe it's something close to that. So it might be worthwhile I can contact him and see if he's, if that's something that if they are truly the state's guinea pig for that. One of the other pieces with that is Health and Human Services has, after a great deal of consternation and nail biting and horror stories being told to them about the effects of Medicare equalization that they started on January 1st. I don't want to say completely unannounced. It just was, it kind of caught a lot of people by surprise, which is where they're not paying the copay on patients that are primary Medicare but secondary Medicaid, which is affecting a lot of agencies in the state. There's some agencies that I've seen their numbers that are 33, 50, 55% reduction in their Medicaid dollars as a result of the stoppage of crossovers. So HHSC has realized that this is having a more powerful effect on the ambulance industry than what they originally thought. And so effective September 1st, in the new fiscal year, they're not going to go backwards, but in the new fiscal year starting September 1st, they're going to reinstate crossovers on the Medicaid definition of emergencies and all hospital-to-hospital transfers. And their thought is that makes good public policy sense because When somebody dials 911 or it's an emergency call, even a Medicaid definition of emergency doesn't necessarily involve 911. But so somebody falls in the nursing home and an ambulance is summoned. That is, they feel that there's not a time to figure out the billing status of the patient, so there's not an opportunity for the ambulance provider to get out of doing that transport. Hospital to hospital, the same way, they feel makes good public policy sense because it helps maintain the healthcare system. Patients usually go from hospital to hospital because they're going for an advanced level of care they can't get in the hospital that they're in. And so maintaining that makes sure that we're continuing to take care of the patients. There still is a lot of folks talking to them about reinstituting it for other transports. And one of the other things they've stumbled across now that they had not thought about was what do they do for agencies that get hit with the Medicare deductible. A lot of us know that. We don't bill in January, February. We wait for that deductible to get spent, hopefully on the hospital, and or physicians. And but you know, if the patient's first time in an ambulance is June or July, there's a good chance our billing processes will spin it around quick. We'll get it billed, and we get caught with the deductible. So they're trying to find a way with the crossover payment to not have us eat the loss of crossover plus the deductible piece that we wouldn't get to. So they are paying attention to that. Some folks in the meetings have shared with them the concern that by reinstituting crossovers on emergencies, that may lead some folks to upcharge claims to emergency that might not otherwise be emergency claims, or wait and deny service until it becomes an emergency. And so they're kind of twisted up on that. So I don't think we've heard the end, but there is some relief coming come September 1st. So anyway, any questions, any thoughts, comments on the Medicare equalization or this new fandangled way to get your costs covered by HHSC? I think it says something to us when they send us a letter saying, here, we want to help, and everybody's really suspicious. All right. And then the last thing on here is Medicare revalidation. Kelly Harrell helped me, and we put some information out in one of the recent EMS magazines here in Texas about this. There were some agencies in our RAC that got hit by this. What happened is under the Affordable Care Act, they said that everybody who's a Medicare provider has to get revalidated. And part of that is, and it has to be done, is it the next 5 years? There's a time frame on it, so it's not going to hit everybody all at once. But what they do is they send you a letter, and at first they're just sending you a letter, and then if you didn't respond, they said, well, they must not be a valid provider anymore, and they were just pulling your ticket. And a lot of people started freaking out. So they send you a letter, and then they send you a second letter, and then they're contracting with people, because part of the revalidation can be, and in a lot of instances is, a site visit to make sure that, and this is not just ambulances, this is all Medicare providers. So they're making sure that the durable medical equipment dealer is actually in the storefront, and they're doing all that kind of stuff they're supposed to be doing. The problem is that they're contracting this service out, and they're not necessarily, to start with, they weren't being real good in their education of the folks about how EMS operates. So there was a provider, it was a volunteer provider, and is apt to happen, they got licensed with CMS years ago, and really hadn't updated anything, and they'd moved to a different building, and their money was going where the money needed to go. But the validation letter went to, there's a certain address on the application it goes to, and that address had changed for this organization, and they had not updated CMS. The volunteer organization, they changed leaders several times, and you know how it is in so many, it's been in our industry for years. Oh, you've been here the longest, you're in charge. So, they don't necessarily know everything they're supposed to be doing. And so the letter got lost, it never did get to the right person, or maybe somebody saw it and they didn't understand it, and they put it in a file, and it just sat there. So they sent a contracted site inspector out to see if they could find them. And they went to the building, and they knocked on the door, and nobody answered the door because it's a volunteer organization, and they're all at home. So they documented that nobody's in the building. It appears that there's no employees. and they sent that in, and CMS pulled their Medicare ticket. We had another agency where they went to an outlying station to do the site visit, and there was nobody there because the ambulance was on a call. And they said, it looks like this site's been abandoned, and because there was no truck in the bay. So they, again, pulled their Medicare ticket. So it's a serious deal. You need to make sure that your addresses and your phone numbers are correct with CMS through the PACA system if you're registered on that, and if not, through the 8,042 page application change process that they have on paper, so that when this comes up, you don't miss that. It's very critical, because once you lose that number, then and you start screaming wanting it back, they're like, well, then you have to go through that whole rigmarole about trying to justify why you weren't there and why it looked like the place was abandoned and all that other stuff. So it's best just to push through with that. There's been enough outcry around the country that they're trying to get better educated when the people come out. They're trying to take extra steps to try to chase organizations down, especially ambulance organizations. But at the same time, it could be devastating to lose your ability to bill Medicare for 6 or 9 months. So help folks in your region, get that word out there. And folks, you can go to the Medicare website and subscribe to their email list. And what they do is when they send out revalidation letters, they send out an email and they say, hey, another group of revalidation letters has been sent out in August. And there's a link, and you can click on that, and you can scroll through all the Medicare providers that they sent the letters to. And so folks can see if they're supposed to have gotten a letter, if they think their address may not be correct, or if they're just nervous about it. And so they can see if they're on there. And if they are, then they can just start that process pushing through. So anything on that? Just wanted to say that again. I'll probably say that again every meeting for the next 2 or 3 times. It's just hard. And remember, our contracted provider or payer is changing in Texas, and they said late August, so anytime now they're going to be sending letters out on how to get registered and get your EFTs set up with them, so that in November, when it switches from Trailblazer to Novartis, or Novartis, or however you say that name, hopefully the money will still go to the right place. Anything else general public comment wise? Anybody have anything for the good of the order? Anything you want that you think the committee needs to be looking at? Want to come up and yell at me because we canceled the meeting really late and you showed up and hung out in Jeff Hayes' office for a couple hours? Wow. I'm nervous that they're so quiet.
Dudley, we need to look at the medical director and try to perform a position statement on transporting patients to freestanding ERs. We probably need to pay attention to what's going on with the medical directors committee and their position on that.
What Justin said is medical directors committee is looking at a number of position papers, and one of them is transports or a position on transporting to freestanding ERs or maybe non-traditional ERs. And I agree. I think I can approach them. I'd like to see kind of let them do the legwork on that. It's a little bit of a confusing topic. There's a wide variety of those little animals out there. But I think as well, from our perspective, there's from the operations side with medical direction, I think we need to be prepared to respond to that and provide input to that where appropriate. The other thing they talked about at length for those that weren't in the medical directors committee, and if you were, I apologize for the repetitiveness, but there are new rules out that are being promulgated by the Texas Medical Board about EMS medical directors. And if your medical director is not aware of those, you need to get them. I believe they're on the website under the documents for the medical directors meeting today. You need to take a look at those, share those with your medical director. There'll be a time for comment on those. They're essentially, DSHS and the medical board have been working very closely together to address some of the issues in the larger metropolitan areas with these illegitimate providers. And one of the areas they're having a lot of issues with is medical control. And the medical board is working to strengthen their rules so that they can go after the physicians who may be getting caught up in the illegitimate business practices. So there's things in there about limiting the number of services. There's things in there about education of the medical director's course, things like that that your medical director's probably going to want to know about. And so you need to look at that, read through it, talk to the folks on the medical directors committee if you weren't here for their meeting, and be prepared to make comment when the medical board opens that up for public comment.
Along those same lines, I just came back a couple of weeks ago from National Fire Academy. I took that Hot Topics for EMS Research. Great class. One of the things that we learned is that they have a brand new book. It's a handbook, national, the NFA just published for medical directors. Absolutely free. Go to their website and you can download it actually. And then they also really stress that, especially on the EMS side, applications for National Fire Academy are down. And they have some great classes, mid-level management classes, advanced management classes, the Hot Topics class. I took what we hope is the last of the pilot classes there, and we think we worked out all the bugs of it. So it should be a good class in the very near future. But you might prod your guys to start using National Fire Academy. If we don't use it, it was a large fight to get EMS into the National Fire Academy. If it's not utilized, we could lose that. In fact, there was a team from Congress there looking at that issue while I was there.
So you all looked really busy.
We did, and it's free, by the way, as is everything else they do.
Fantastic. Any other comments? Anybody from the audience? All right. So we'll meet on October 12th in Dallas. We'll get that location published. We'd like everybody to be there, wants to be there. We're going to talk about the anti-fraud stuff, some of those ideas that were suggested. All right, we got somebody. Come on up, man.
How's it going? Brock with Air Medical. On behalf of TAMES, just want to invite everybody to the November 9th Texas EMS Hall of Honor Annual Golf Tournament. It's to be held at Onion Creek Country Club, and it'll be the Friday right before the conference. 1 p.m. shotgun start, $125 a player, or $400 a foursome. You can register at tames.org for sponsorship opportunities.
Oh, cool.
Thank you.
I heard a lot of good things out of that golf tournament last year, and it goes to a great cause. So, anything else?
Civic cause.
Oh, the EMS Hall of Honor, the thing they do at conference and stuff on the folks that lose their life during the year here in Texas. Maxie, you have something?
Yeah, since you got all this time. I just want to make y'all aware, particularly our rural and frontier areas for this year's conference. If they'll look in the magazine, there are scholarships for people to come to the EMS conference. And the priorities are given to people from rural and frontier areas, people who've never been to a conference before, volunteer agencies and the such. So I would encourage you all, I think there are about 80-something, maybe even 90 scholarships that's going to be available, and it will pay for the hotel, registration, parking. I think, is that it, Kelly? Right, to the Texas Department of Agriculture, where our rural people lie now. But I would encourage people who are interested in coming to the conference from rural and frontier areas to be sure to apply.
All right. Another great opportunity. Anything else? All right. I would say next door, but it's only next door right there. It's not next door right there. But TTAF has put together kind of a celebration of 20 years of trauma services, EMS and trauma services here in Texas. So a lot of the racks and a number of other different organizations have tables set up in there. So if you haven't moseyed all the way around the circle, head around to like the big double staircase going upstairs and you'll see that room. You got 30 minutes before trauma systems, so if you haven't been in there, it'd be a great time to go visit that. And with that, I'll say that we're done. Thank y'all.
I annotate.